Hi everyone, it's Catherine. Thanks for joining me today on a little bit of a Friday lunch break with Resin. I wanted to talk today about a question I get asked a lot, and it usually gets asked after the fact from people who've used a mold and they've poured into the mold and they demold their project only to find that the resin didn't come out as shiny and clear as what they were expecting. And so the big rule and the big takeaway you need to take today is just because you use a silicone mold to cast your resin does not guarantee that you're going to have a super bright, shiny, glossy finish. Okay, so let's talk about that for a moment. So what I've got here today are a couple of silicone molds that I got on sale. This one came from the dollar store, paid a couple bucks for it. This one I got a couple years ago from another craft store after Halloween, and this is a mold, and in fact both of them are molds that are meant for food purposes. Okay, and you can get these pretty inexpensive, and they're a great way to let you try working with silicone molds. The problem with these molds is I'd say 90% of the time the castings you get from these molds are going to have a frosted appearance. And I cast in these molds earlier this week to kind of give you some, I guess to kind of let you know a little bit what I'm talking about. So let's start with this mold here on the right. So this mold has a very matte finish and a very dull surface. Nothing wrong with the mold, but it's got this frosted type appearance, and this is what castings from the mold look like. You can see this is a witch hat that came out, and it's got this sandpapery look to it. Okay, everything cured fine, no problems with it, but it's not bright and shiny. Versus this one here on the left, this is also an inexpensive mold, and I gotta tell you, this is the exception to the rule. I almost never get these inexpensive molds where they come out bright and shiny, but this one did. Okay, so you can see the big difference between these two is that this one has a bright and shiny interior. This one does not. Okay, so the rule is that whatever was used to make your mold, meaning the template, if that template is not bright and shiny, your castings are not going to be bright and shiny either. Okay, so you can't just assume that because you're using a silicone mold that you're going to have a bright and shiny finish. So this is a pretty key point. It certainly doesn't mean you can't use the mold. It certainly doesn't mean that your resin castings aren't going to work. It just means you're not going to get a bright and shiny finish. So along that line, if you want to get a bright and shiny and polished finish from your molds, then you do have a couple different options. So option number one is you can use something like our resin gloss sealer spray. Let me grab a can of that real quick. If you are in the continental United States, we can ship this product to you. It comes as an aerosol spray. It's great for leaving a shinier finish to your castings. It's also great for sealing items before you put them in resin. This is what I use to seal flowers with. It's also great for sealing irregular shapes that don't do well with tape or glue. Now, this is not going to be 100% like catch-all here, and I say that because the more matte your finish, the more that matte is going to come through. So I don't know how well you can see. This is one that a casting from this mold that I sprayed with the spray yesterday. And it's a little brighter, it's a little shinier than this casting here on the right, but it's not super glossy, but it did add a nice finish to it. It made the grooves a little more recognizable, you know, better than probably just leaving it by itself. Your other option is you can try and coat your castings with another layer of resin. Now, I tried to do that yesterday with this one, and the tricky part is that these they're like casted on a slope, so the hat end is actually higher than the pointy part of our hat end. So what I did is I tried to balance it on toothpicks. So I put a bunch of toothpicks here in my tray and tried to balance it and tried to get this even. I still didn't get it quite even enough, and so you can see where, because this was the high point, the resin pulled away from the charm and it left this edge bare, so it's not really attractive looking. You know, if you've got a flat surface, I think, you know, another layer of resin is the way to go. Otherwise, I do like the spray. You can also see that the spray leaves these grooves open, so if that, being able to see those grooves or that texture is important to you, whereas it does tend to fill in these a little better. So, all right, so to recap, rule number 1, just because you're working with silicone molds does not mean you're going to have a bright and shiny finish, okay? So rule number 2, if you're not sure about what you're going to get, take a look at the casting mold or look at the casting surface. You can see this surface is matte. It feels matte. It doesn't feel shiny at all. Not that it feels rough, but it feels, you can feel a little bit of drag to it when you run your thumb across it. So that should be a clue to you that you're not going to get shiny castings with this. Versus this one, this is also a dollar store mold, but you know, occasionally you do find a shiny one. You can see that the inside surface of this mold is quite shiny, and so as a result, you get shiny castings. All right. So if you are ever in doubt about what you're getting, ask. So for example, if you're buying silicone molds from us at resinobsession.com, we try and include that information with the product listing, but if it's not there or you can't find it or you're not sure, by all means, please ask. We're happy to help you get the finish that you need. Now, if for some reason you used a mold like this and you didn't want a shiny finish, all you have to do is use some really fine grit sandpaper, something like a 600 to 800, maybe even 1000, and you could lightly go over your piece and it'll give a nice matte finish without it looking like it's been sanded. It really gives a pretty nice finish. So, okay. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining me today for our Friday lunch break. Let's do this again next Friday. And if you guys have something you want me to talk about, by all means, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. All right, everyone. Happy casting.